Hello, everybody. My name's Ed Pavlik. I'm in Lexington, Kentucky. I'm in here for a new edition of GYN Garage with my colleague in the United Kingdom.
Frank Lawton from London.
Very good. Well, today I'm going to take up a paper that we may surprise you with. It certainly could be true because I brought this paper up to tumor conference here at the University of Kentucky, and someone asked if it was only because I'd seen Oppenheimer. And actually, the result that I had to remind them of was no, I had not seen Oppenheimer. I bring the paper to our attention and to the attention of the tumor conference was that this editorial appeared in a variety of very highly respected medical journals at the same time. This one happens to be in JAMA, and it's really an exhortation to first become aware of the fact that there is a nuclear threat. And that's probably necessary because most of the world is young enough to not really be that sensitive to a Cold War or to the nuclear threats of the Cold War. The other reason is that this paper calls for physicians to take action. And I think that means the physicians are well armed with knowing what the treatment possibilities are if there is a nuclear war. And the possibilities are zero, really. So how should physicians react or act? I think they need to be aware that probably their most powerful position is when they're either called upon by someone who has a political position that's a voting position or a policy setting position, or when they happen to be in a casual position with someone like that, maybe at lunch or whatever, and this enters the conversation. It is sort of astonishing to me how many nuclear weapons there are in the world, 13,000, and we'd only need about 250 of them to create a limited nuclear war where the death toll would be 120 million. And yet that's only if it's limited. If it basically was an all large scale nuclear war, we can expect 200 million or no more to be immediately killed. And the after effects of a nuclear winter would probably thin the world to about 25% of its current population by killing 5 to 6 billion people. I say that living in a country, in a world rather, that has roughly 8 billion people. So the consequences are pretty high. I think that we have to realize that we're asking a stand on maybe three things. First, to adopt a no use first policy. First use should be something that a country really takes as their first stand. Second is to take all nuclear weapons off any type of hair trigger alert. And third is to urge countries or states that are involved in conflicts to pledge that they won't use nuclear weapons in the conflicts they are involved in at present. So, not having seen Oppenheimer and not being moved by it, but being moved by this editorial, that's why I bring it to our attention. Frank, let me know what you think.
Well, two things. I'm old enough to have seen Dr. Strangelove, which was Stanley Kubrick's take on the potential for nuclear war, black and white film, probably the 1960s. And I think this idea of trigger hair is important because it only just takes somebody to press the wrong button, either in panic or disarray or whatever else, for it to start. And the closing scene of Dr. Strangelove was the bombs just going backwards and forwards across the atmosphere into each other's backyards. And I have seen Oppenheimer, and I thought it was an absolutely brilliant film. But I think that perhaps there is, I would agree with you, I think there is a generation who knows about nuclear war because they've seen it on films, but I don't think they really know what it means to us. I think possibly the pandemic might actually be quite useful in persuading politicians, governments, and people who influence to see the absolute devastation that it caused to human activity in all the big cities because of lockdown, and the people that were ill and the strains put on the medical profession. And basically that is nothing compared with what will happen if and when a large megaton or kiloton bomb drops in the middle of Los Angeles or London or Berlin or Paris. And I would agree entirely. At first, when I read the paper, I thought it was a little bit condescending, but going into it, I think that the people who've written this, I understand completely why they're exhorting us to say, try and do something about it, not do something about it, because I don't think as individual clinicians, physicians, we can, but we can influence in mass, I think, eventually. I mean, for instance, I don't think governments would have banned smoking because smoking produces a big tax income for governments. It was physicians, it was Richard Doll et al. Who started to tell governments, do you know what's happening with this apparently benign hobby that people have, this pastime? So I think things like seatbelts and crash helmets. So we have a track history of influencing government policy, and I think this one is something that we are aware of, and I think the more people that are aware of it, whether that's general public or clinicians, politicians, I think it's important.
From a financial standpoint, it's literally incredible how much a single nuclear weapon costs. Multi-million dollars. I mean, over $20 million for a single nuclear weapon. And there's a huge number of them in the world. Now, maybe some countries can build them a lot less expensively, but nevertheless, that's a huge amount of finance going into this. The other thing that I'll say in closing is that if one nuclear bomb, like in Japan, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, were to go off, the radius rule applies, that there's a fall off in the radiation from the center outward. But that's only in the direct radiation. The weather carried radiation does even more damage. So if you look at how much radiation we deliver as treatments, it's around 2 gray to a specific site. And the reason it's to a specific site, if we did it to the whole body, we'd be killing people. We know that. That's why we shield sites, and that's why we focus it. And we could expect that at least 10 times more than 2 gray would be concentrated in the first 100 miles after a nuclear explosion with today's weapons. So there's a seriousness of this that exists. The people who could be treated probably could only be treated with antibiotics, because the first part of the body that would be decimated would be the immune system. And the people who could be treated then would be limited by the available antibiotics, or maybe even some sort of immune transplant. So essentially, you're best off if you live someplace 200 miles below the ground, just above the lava beds, and then can crawl out some 5 years later when nuclear is decimated.
There's a very interesting article. The biggest or the most powerful, I assume it's a hydrogen bomb that the Russians have. It's called the Tsar Bomber. And it has been worked out that if the Tsar Bomber did an airburst less than a mile over the centre of London, Westminster essentially, where the palace is, the effects would be felt in Brighton, which is 80 miles away. And not just the effects of radiation 3 months on, but the effect, the fireball not getting to Brighton, but the effect, 80 miles. And that's just one bomb. God knows how many they've got, or we've got for that matter. We don't know, do we? Too many.
Yeah, that's exactly, that's exactly the point. in this country, as you can see in
Oh,
black,
yeah.
there are the places that we'd expect somebody to target, which are literally everywhere. And if you could say that, well, many of them won't get through, a number are going to get through. And we get back to your example with Brighton,
Yeah.
that the whole country is going to feel the direct effects some way or another.
Oh, yeah. And even if you're not affected by the outcome, the radiation, the firebomb, etc., as you said, the nuclear winter, there'll be no food. You won't be able to grow anything because the sun won't get through. So essentially, we're living in possibly even a decade or longer of a winter without the sun, darkness. I mean, yeah, yes. Perhaps Ed, the next one we can have a happier review, something easier.
I agree. I think that we've gone into the garage and beyond.
Yeah.
And we can look forward to meeting again with
Yeah.
some paper that we both thought really brought us gifts of knowledge, and
Yes.
that had some things that were limitations, but the
Yeah.
limitations were not that serious. I will tell you, Frank, I did get another comment on what we're doing, and the comment was from a place called Dylwania. And the only Dylwania I could find from this person, who I thought from the nature of what she said, which was along the lines that she sort of liked watching these things, the only thing I could divine was that Dylwania was in Australia. And it's a small town in New South Wales, I believe, is what I found. But there's also a all women's prison there. So I do not know if we got a
fan base.
a fan base in prison or a captive population. It may well be that we do have a captive population, but that was a positive comment that we receive on what we're doing.
I'm going to try and live out on that one, Ed. That's a cracker.
Okay, well, I'll see you again in a month.
You take care, my friend.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye now. Bye.